Now, Madam President, I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about the Senate Democrats' latest effort to grab headlines and to energize their base. Though the business on the floor has officially been nominations, my friends on the other side of the aisle came in overnight to talk about climate change and the supposed need to change the way we produce and consume energy in this country. Now, we've heard a lot of talk about science and the supposed refusal on the part of Republicans to acknowledge the quote-unquote truth. What we haven't heard is a plan for lowering energy costs or for putting Americans back to work. The fact is, Madam President, when the Democrats talk about climate change, more often than not, they're advocating policies that would do exactly the opposite. And the funny thing is, they've got to know it by now. They've got to know that that's what they're doing. They're talking about proposals that would increase energy costs for American families and businesses. They've got to know that. And they're pushing policies that will put even greater stress on our economy and make it more difficult for our citizens to find and even keep a job. That's why we have an underemployment rate of over 12%. For example, last year, the President announced his, quote, climate action plan, unquote, which directs the EPA to implement and impose new oppressive regulations on the energy industry that will have a significant impact on jobs and the pocketbooks of the American people. Increasing the cost of energy, which this plan would surely do, will not only make our struggling manufacturing sector less globally competitive, it will impose costs directly on the American people in the form of higher prices on electricity and other costs as well. Put simply, in order to create jobs and improve our global competitiveness, we need to find ways to help businesses reduce the amount of money that they spend on energy. Unfortunately, this president is trying to do the exact opposite. At the same time, we should be exploring ways to make raising a family more affordable. Unfortunately, the president's plan would increase the cost of living for every household in America. Talk about inequality. I was very interested in one of the leading unions that was one of the first to support the president. Said that he's caused more inequality than anybody. When I say he, they mean the president. Unfortunately, the president's plan would increase the cost of living for every household in America. This, Madam President, is the height of irresponsibility. At a time when so many people are still feeling the impact of the Great Recession, the administration, not to mention its allies in Congress, wants to put in place regulations and mandates that will cripple American businesses and cause direct harm on American families trying to make ends meet. I find it striking that throughout all the lectures we've seen on climate change science here on the floor over the past 2 days, none of my colleagues appears to be willing to acknowledge the very real impact of their preferred policies. Thousands of communities across the country depend on the responsible development of our nation's natural resources for a living. And access to abundant and affordable energy is attractive to domestic investment and provides high-paying jobs in our local economies. We can develop these resources in an environmentally friendly way, but my colleagues on the other side of the aisle don't appear to be willing to have that conversation. Instead, they want to demagogue the use of fossil fuels and impose costly mandates and regulations on the harvesting of our resources and on the production of our energy. What's interesting is they're doing it to a lot of the people in a lot of the states that used to support them. We need to be pushing an all of the above, inclusive approach to the development of energy if we are going to improve our energy security and become a global leader in energy production. It is not the job of the government to pick winners and losers. Yet with all their talk about climate change and the need for Republicans to, quote, wake up, unquote, that's precisely what my friends in the other party want to do. Madam President, I would hope that given all the challenges facing our nation, from sluggish economic growth to lackluster jobs creation to less than 30-hour work weeks, on and on and on, I would hope my colleagues would devote more of their time trying to find real solutions for the American people instead of trying to please their liberal base with alarmist rhetoric about climate change and false promises about the future of energy production in this country. We all know that some of their preferred production of energy is not producing it. We all know that it never will produce enough to really solve our problems. We all know that people have lost jobs time and time again in this country because of the lack of energy. We all know that it's made us a weaker country. And yet we have this blind faith that they're right and everybody else is wrong. Well, I think jobs are the conversation that the American people want to really talk about and hear. Yeah, we'd like to keep things clean and good and orderly. On the other hand, you can't do that without jobs. You can't do that without people being able to earn a living. You can't run our inner cities and towns without energy. And we're giving in to some of the most radical theories that I've ever seen in the whole time that I've been here. Well, you know, we ought to get rid of the false promises, and we ought to do the very best we can to clean up our environment in every way we possibly can without destroying the energy and the energy capacities that we know we have and losing all the jobs that come from that. Now, that's a conversation the American people want to hear. And I hope that eventually that's a conversation we can have here in the Senate. This is one where my colleagues are very sincere. I don't want to disparage any of them. On the other hand, in many respects, are sincerely wrong, and they're costing America its greatness. One of the problems I have with our president, our current president, is that I don't believe he believes in American exceptionalism. And he's doing so many things that are destroying our exceptionalism. And the rest of the world knows it, but our folks here in America are having a rough time grasping it. I think it's a desire to always treat everybody well and to try and support our presidents, which certainly we ought to try and do. But there's a reason why we're starting to slip. There's a reason why the average wage in this country has gone down $4,000 to $5,000. There's a reason why, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation just a few years ago, 51% of the American people are not in the process of paying one dime of income taxes. And I'm the last one to want them to pay income taxes who shouldn't. But my gosh, you can't run a country this way. We're going to have to start facing the music that the greatest country in the world is losing its nerve. It's losing its verve, V-E-R-V-E. And there's no excuse for it. No other country in the world can even compare with us. So why are we doing things that are making us less and less and less and less? Madam President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.